this and publish it later. And I'll go into share in a minute or two and put a little presentation up that I put together as well, so you don't just have to sit here listening to me droning on in a monosyllabic voice. And we'll get going quite soon. I'll turn my camera off once we get started as well, so we can kind of concentrate on the presentation and what's being said. And then towards the end, I'll turn it back on, and we'll go through some questions if anybody has any. Or you may just want to say, "Oh, thanks, that was great. Thanks for wasting my entire lunchtime." So you'll be able to enjoy a cup of tea or something, and maybe a sandwich. Although lunch isn't provided. When has it ever been provided, I wonder? So a couple of names there I recognise. And I think just as many people joining as many people have asked for the recording. So for those of you just joining, do be aware that the session's being recorded. And just as 12 o'clock comes, I'm sure quite a few more people will join us. As you can see, I'm at home. There's my massive telescope as well, which kind of brings the night sky a little closer to me. Although I've got some, online friends, not real friends, online friends, and they've got these really expensive cameras and stuff that they hook up to the telescope lens, to the viewer, and they've produced some amazing pictures. And with that telescope, I've been lucky enough to see the the big red dot on Saturn and the rings of Jupiter as well. It's amazing. Sort of winter time when there's sort of less light around and it's darker earlier, so there's more absorption. You can get to see these amazing planets and sights and things. And the first time I saw it, I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. It was because you don't really see color definition, and of course the view's upside down, but you don't really know that because in space there is no up or down, is there? There's just space. And seeing it for the first time was it's incredible. I'm getting little you're making the hairs stand up on my arm, which I haven't shaved, funnily enough, like the rest of my body. I didn't have a beard before lockdown. So look, it is 12 o'clock. Some people may join as we go through. So let's bring up the presentation first of all. And I'm going to use PowerPoint Live, so I'll be able to see any reactions and things like that. And as I say, I'll probably turn my camera off when it comes to it, when it comes to using it. Now, you are able to navigate through my slide presentation. I'd rather you didn't, and I can stop you doing it by clicking on a little button. But I've noticed that for some people, that just gives them a blank screen as well. So so you might be tempted to skip through, but try not to. Don't spoil the surprise. So it's just gone 12 o'clock. So welcome to this session of Learning at Work Week. I'm always doing stuff like Teams, Excel, Word, and all that sort of stuff, and Outlook. So for me, it's a chance to do something slightly different. And I thought today, hi Darren, today we'd have a look at UK tax laws between 1972 and 1977. So I hope everybody is sitting comfortably, but of course we're not really, are we? We're going to be looking at some of the sky at night, and I've kind of got three things lined up to go through. The main part that we're going to look at in the session is the mythology behind Ursa Major, the Big Bear, the Big Dipper, but the Big Dipper's only really part of the Big Bear, and there's also a little bear, Ursa Minor, that's up there as well, just above the Big Bear. They both follow each other, rotate through the night sky. It's a northern hemisphere only constellation, certainly has been for a few thousand years anyway. So we're going to have a little look at that, and we'll also have a look at my favourite planet, Mercury. We won't have a look at it, just tell you how to spot it. It's moving into Is it, I think, inferior conjunction, whatever the heck that means. It's moving into inferior conjunction, and that means that from kind of next week onwards, I think, and certainly through June, it moves into the morning sky. And if you are up early, I'll tell you how early, then you will be able to see Mercury with the naked eye as well. As you know, planet closest to the sun. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we're also going to have a look at something called noctilucent clouds, if that's how you pronounce it. We're going to find out whether we can see them. They're quite elusive, a bit like the Northern Lights. But I have a friend over here, a real friend, not a Facebook friend, a real friend lives over in the east of England, in East Anglia, kind of looking towards the North Sea kind of thing. And they've seen the Northern Lights twice last year, again in the winter. If you can see the Northern Lights from there, you know, Norwich way, then you're certainly able to see them from Birmingham, but you might just need to get out of town a little bit. So I'm going to turn my camera off now, and we're going to kind of begin the whole thing. So let's just go on to the next slide. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about the Bear. There's that Big Dipper. And the Big Dipper are those 7 stars, and we're going to sort of drill down into a bit more detail about them in a moment or two as well. As I'm sure you know, every culture has its myths and stories handed down from generation to generation, not just about the night sky, but about all sorts of things. And the myths around Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, which we'll find out a bit more about later, they're absolutely no different in that those stories have been handed on for many thousands of years, and in some cases maybe, you know, towards the end of the last ice age, there were humans, although I don't think they were called humans at that point. Sort of Neanderthal man was around 70 years ago. 70 years ago, my God, I was around 70 years ago, 70,000 years ago, and between that was while Siberia and Alaska were kind of joined up, and we'll find out a little bit about them as well. We'll also touch on the Arab and Native American histories that influence the constellation that we're looking at today as well. But we'll concentrate as ever on where we are, which is Western Europe, and the influence that Western Europe has on those constellations is, of course, the Roman and Greek mythology, which are often hand in hand. The main differences between the two, the stories are normally the same, with a couple of exceptions, notable exceptions. But the players, the characters, and I use players as a decent term for this, then they just are the same but with different names. So Jupiter is Zeus, Zeus is Jupiter, Juno is Hera, that's his wife, and vice versa. I suppose the first thing to put out there really is that Ursa Major, this thing you can see here, wasn't originally a bear. She was a lady. She was a beautiful lady, sort of goddess level. But of course, she was a lover and a muse to a god, Zeus, or in Roman mythology, Jupiter. So if I mention Jupiter and Zeus, it is the same person. And if you know anything about your mythology around Zeus / Jupiter, you'll know he had a weakness, and that weakness was how can I put it? Keeping it in his pants, I think, was that weakness, certainly. So we're going to start with the main 7 stars. So we've got the tail up here, haven't we, of the bear? And it's quite a long tail for a bear. Bears don't normally have such long tails. And then we've got the 4 stars here, which kind of make up, there's actually a double star in there as well, and those 4 stars make up the ladle portion, if you like. Some people call it the big spoon, the big ladle, some people call it the Big Dipper, but we're going to concentrate on those 7 stars. So the Big Dipper is actually part of the constellation Ursa Major. It's called an asterism, and Ursa Major translates literally, doesn't it, as bear, big, major, big, like Mallorca is the bigger island, Mallorca is the bigger island there, and Ursa being the Latin for bear. As I said earlier, there's a little bear, Ursa Minor, and we'll touch on him because he's a him. Ursa Major is a her, and Ursa Major and Ursa Minor are among some of the oldest recognized patterns in the sky. As time progressed from many tens of thousands of years ago, this night sky looked a bit different, and sort of constellations didn't just happen, didn't just come into being, but it's about them being recognized. And I think if you look up at the sky at any time of the year, you'll pretty much see the Big Dipper, the bear. It's a very prominent pattern of bright stars. It's a northern hemisphere only constellation, as I mentioned earlier, and it actually occupies over 3%. I think it's about 3.10% of the entire night sky, which is massive, absolutely massive. Orion, we looked at Orion the Hunter, didn't we, in the last Learning at Work week, if you join me for that. And that was just, I think, about 1%, about 1.4%. So Ursa Major is a whopper. And if you've looked up, you'll have seen it. Now, before we go to the next slide, I see that someone's got their hand up there. Amanda, do you want to bung in a question straight away?
Yeah, it's a very quick question. You've mentioned the Big Dipper and the bear. When I was a child, my dad pointed that out to me and called it the plough.
Yeah, we're good.
Or is that
Yeah,
just a different name for
absolutely.
it?
No, I'm going to talk about that as well. It is exactly the same one. And I think it's a generational thing as well, Amanda, to some degree, about what you do call it. And it's also a cultural thing about what people call it as well. Let's move on to that next slide. And this, it kind of breaks it down in a little bit of detail. It's a little bit naive, isn't it, this slide? But it does break it down a bit. So there's 7 stars there that form that Big Bear, that Big Dipper, or the Plough. I think that's a very common Western Europe name for it as well, the Plough. It's those 7 stars that we're interested in today. They don't make up the whole the whole constellation, do they? But for many people, as Amanda said, it represents different things, and a plough is one of them. For some cultures, it's a wagon. For some, a coffin. In the sort of Arab mythology of constellations, it is indeed a coffin. In other cultures, it's a skunk or a camel, a shark, a canoe, I think a bushel, and a sickle. Even for some people, it's a pig's jaw, a hog's jaw. I'm not quite sure I can see that, but there's a very long list of different names for it as well. And I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, stories about this constellation date back almost to the last ice age, some sort of 70,000 years ago, when those ancient people would cross the Bering Strait between, you know, what is now Alaska and what is now Siberia. But that was one massive landmass at that point. And at that time, cultures in both those areas, Siberia and Alaska, because of that crossover, they shared a common heritage. And I think it's generally accepted that the constellation got its name about 50,000 years ago. There was a Paleolithic bear cult, and you know, that's disputed by various anthropologists and archaeologists, and I won't really dive down that rabbit hole or bear cave or black hole. We had a news about a new massive black hole just like next door, didn't we, last week? We might pick that up in another one. But there's a recurring theme throughout history, both real history and mythological history, and that's the kinship between bears and humans. And I think a lot of that's to do with the fact that, you know, bears can, you know, they walk along on all fours, don't they? But they can stand up on their hind legs as well, can't they? And I've got some actual footage of an Ice Age bear here, doing exactly that. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's no sound, but you know, there they are, and that's what bears can do. And I think because of that kind of kinship was born, wasn't it? Because humans who were walking on 2 legs could see bears walking on 4, and then suddenly raising up to 2 legs as well. So I think there was quite a relationship between those two. I think, and with Ursa Major, as it like travels through the heavens, it constantly changes from 4 feet to 2 feet positions. We call that quadrupedal and bipedal positions, so quad 4 by 2. It appears to do that in the night sky as well, sort of almost seemingly running along on all fours towards the horizon, and then rising again to its hind feet as it begins its ascent back into the sky as the Earth moves around. There's many fairy tales and fantasies written about people taking the form of bears as well, and in some cultures, bears are regarded as gods. Bang up to date, a bear appears prominently in the Disney film Brave. I don't know if you've got kids or whether you've seen that yourself, but Merida's mother, the sort of main protagonist, Merida of the story, her mother's a bear, and that film was originally called The Bear and the Bow, I think, before it was released. So, how did this charming bear constellation get into the sky, I think, is where we need to go now. I mentioned that it was a beautiful lady, and here you are. That beautiful maiden was called Callisto, and she was a hunting companion of the goddess Artemis. Here she is in a kind of contemporary view, and as a sort of more almost modest statue. That first picture, I think, comes from an American program called Xena Warrior Princess. And it's funny, isn't it, how the women always get sort of leather or metal bikinis, and the men heroes get capes and suits and things like that. But again, that's another whole different story for a different day. Now, Callisto was out hunting, as you do. There wasn't a lot to do, really, other than hunt and sleep and something else. So she grew tired, she laid down to rest, and that was her big mistake, her first big mistake, really, was lying down to rest. Now, bear with me on this next slide, because it doesn't look like what I'm about to tell you is depicted in this picture. But Zeus, Jupiter, sitting up high on his cloud or his mountaintop or wherever with a view of everything, he noticed her. And as he noticed many nymphs and goddesses, then he was completely smitten with her for that time. Her outstanding beauty enthralled him, and he disguised himself. You might remember from the last session we did, he disguised himself as a bull to attract the daughter of a king, because the daughter of the king was obsessed with bulls and had a massive herd of bulls. Well, he didn't transform into a bull this time. He transformed into a goddess. He transformed into Diana. And here's a picture that was painted around sometime sort of around 1760 by the German painter Angelica Kaufmann. And here he is depicted as Diana here in kind of pale blue. And you might be able to see that crescent moon kind of tiara thing there perched on her head. And that kind of represents Diana, because Diana is the goddess of the moon. And there's a bow and arrow there, isn't there? Let's just go back a step. Sorry, there's a bow and arrow there just behind her shoulder. Because she wasn't just the goddess of the moon, she was also the goddess of the hunt. So there's quite a clear allusion to that in this depiction, many thousands of hundreds of thousands of years later. And obviously, we're talking about a myth, aren't we? So the figure in blue, obviously not Diana, but Jupiter / Zeus disguised as Diana. Now he's about to seduce Callisto. And Callisto was Diana's favourite companion. So at this point, Callisto is thinking, "Oh yeah, I know you. Yeah. We go off hunting together and all of that." It's a bit messed up, isn't it? Greek Roman mythology. It is a little bit messed up. But anywho, now Jupiter's wife. Okay, she comes into this. Juno, or Zeus's wife, Hera, same person. she got a bit of the old green-eyed monster about this. He was always doing it as well. This isn't just, this isn't an isolated incident at all. He was always at this. So she became extremely jealous, and she let that jealousy fester to some degree. And then sometime later, she discovered, Juno, Hera, discovered that Callisto had given birth to a son, and decided that Jupiter, who was pretending to be Diana, I hope you're keeping up, must have been the father. Father. So it's another recurring theme in Jupiter's sexual conquests, was the vengeance handed out by his missus. And to punish Callisto, Juno changed Callisto into a bear, as you do. So she would no longer be beautiful. So at this point, Juno, or Hera, has changed Callisto into a bear, living on Earth as a mortal, but as a bear. It's all a bit Rebecca Vardy and Colleen Rooney at this point, isn't it? Vengeance. That's what Juno and Hera was after. She was after revenge. Now, let's dial it back a little bit. Callisto had a son through Jupiter, didn't she? And that was the reason for this transformation by the goddess. Now, her son was called Arcas, which kind of also means bear. Now, Arcas was adopted by Maia, who was another nymph. In fact, Maia was one of those 7 sisters, the Pleiades. You remember we talked about that constellation before. If not, have a Google of it. You see the Pleiades, they're the 7 charms, the 7 nymphs. And he grew up to become a hunter. Like I said, there was nothing to do. Hunt, sleep, or reproduce. That was pretty much all they did. Now, Callisto, the bear, she continued to live in the forest, just like bears do. And one day, Callisto saw Arcas, saw her son, and she was so overjoyed at seeing her son that she rushed up to him, totally forgetting she was a bear. Remember that film, Brave? I think, the exact same thing happens, or for want of a better word, happens in that film, happens in Brave. Now, Arcas, of course, he didn't know this. He thought he was being attacked. So he loosed an arrow from his quiver and shot the arrow at Callisto. But Jupiter / Zeus, sitting up on his cloud or his mountain, seeing everything, he saw that and he stopped the arrow from hitting Callisto. And then, to save Callisto, he thought, right, well, the best thing I can do here is to change Arcas into, yeah, you guessed it, a bear. And once he changed Arcas into a bear, he grabbed both of them, one in each hand, by their tails, and he swung them into the heavens so that they could live peacefully among the stars, unharmed, unhunted. And I think if I just go to the next slide, look, here's a really kind of old printed version. I'm not sure exactly when, I couldn't find a reference for it. But, bears don't normally have these big long tails, do they? But there's a big long tail on Little Bear, on Ursa Minor, Arcas. And here's a big long bear tail on Callisto. And if we go back to that first slide we looked at, there's that massive long tail. So Amanda, that's your handle of your plough, is basically the extended tail that our chap Jupiter decided to pick them up, and the strength of his throw, of course, put them up into the night sky as we see them there. But that's that's not quite the end of it. So all that did was make Hera, Juno, even angrier, because Jupiter had now protected them, Zeus had protected them. So to exact still more revenge on Callisto and Arcas, she went to the other gods. She went to the gods of the sea, and she asked them to forbade them to let the 2 bears wade into their waters or streams. So they never dip below that equator. They never go in to the southern hemisphere. And that's, the myth around that. They actually, the bears here, can you see that little cross at the top there? That signifies something important. Let's just go to this next slide here. They both traverse the pole star, the North Star. So it's always easy to find. If you know where north is, just look north and you'll see it to the left of sunrise, isn't it? Sunrise in the east. And there are two stars within the main constellation here that point directly at the pole star. So a wonderful navigational aid as well. If we just go back to those, the two stars that point. So wherever the constellation appears in the night sky, obviously it doesn't move, we move, and our view of it changes, doesn't it? So it appears sometimes left to right, sometimes top to bottom, sometimes bottom to top. But these two stars here, Dubhe and Merak, forgive my pronunciation if you're aware of the Arabic word Dubhe, but those two are the stars that point directly towards Polaris. So you can always find Polaris, you always find the North Star very, very bright. Those are both Arabic words, and Dubhe means the back of a bear, and Merek means kind of the flank or the loins of the bear. And if we move back to the slide which shows the whole bear, you can see here, can't you? There's the back of the bear, Dubhe, and there's Merek, the loins of the bear. So not just the constellation getting names, but the stars getting names as well. And sometimes the stars take Arabic names, sometimes the stars take Greek, Roman names, sometimes they take Abyssinian names as well down through Africa, and sometimes they take kind of Native American names as well. I don't know a lot about the South American tribes. Just to sort of back up what Juno did about going to the sea gods and saying, look, don't let them dip down into the streams and the waters, let them forever traverse the North Pole, if you like, Polaris. I've got a couple of quotes for you. The first one from the Roman poet Ovid, to give him his full name, Publius Ovidius Naso. So yeah, Ovid, and he wrote his epic poem Metamorphosis around 2,000 years ago. He wrote that around sort of the time of Christ. He lived just sort of a bit BC and a bit AD. Ovid, he was a real person. He's not mythological, but he wrote of the myth. And there's a couple of lines: snatch them. Jupiter snatched them through the air in whirlwinds up to heaven and fixed them there, where the new constellations nightly rise and add luster to the northern skies. Yeah, I mean, check it out. The poem Metamorphosis is considered his magnum opus, his finest work. It's about 12,000 lines of that sort of poetry over 15 books, and I think it covers something like 250 different myths in there. So yeah, head down to your local library, see if they've got a copy of that to go. Homer, have we got? I think we've got, yeah, look, there's one of the very earliest selfies. That's Homer. He was a Greek poet. Now he lived a good 1,000 years or so before Ovid, so we're going back in time a little bit there. He's about 3,000 years ago, and in 1100 BC he wrote a bit about it as well. And he Arctos, in Greek for bear, he said, Arctos, sole star that never bathes in the ocean waves anyway. Kind of not really sort of poetry, but poetry for me has got a rhyme. But he had a lot to say about it as well. Callisto is the second largest moon of Jupiter as well. Jupiter has 79 moons, and yeah, most of them are named after his sexual conquests, Jupiter's conquests, Zeus's conquests. Most of the names, not all of them, but most of the names of the moons come from that. And like I say, I've been saying Jupiter / Zeus, but the story is basically the same between Greek and Roman mythology. Jupiter becomes Zeus, Juno becomes Hera. So the bear now sits in high altitudes. And in Homer's day, a few thousand years ago, those even then those stars did not sink below the horizon or drop down into the seas, as it were. I said we'd mention other cultures as well, so we know how it got there. We know the key players involved. The Arab myth's quite interesting, though. So the Arab myths associates the constellation group of stars with a funeral. I mentioned earlier. If I just go to this one, there we go. That quadrangle is the coffin in the Arab myth of the funeral, and the three sort of handle stars are the people following the coffin in mourning. The middle star, this one, which is kind of really two stars, it's Mizar and Alcor. They represent the daughter and son of the person in the coffin. The person in the coffin was called Al-Nash, and if you know your Arab culture, you'll know Al-Nash. And again, apologies for the spelling. Al-Nash was murdered by Al-Jadi. Al-Jadi is the pole star in Arab mythology. So again, a huge connection between all of the stars in that same sort of 3% segment of the night sky. Loads of other cultures too relate funeral processions to the Big Dipper, because again, you could hunt, you could sleep, you could but you could die. So those were the main thing going on. And then if we skip over to North America, or Canada, North America, sort of America continent culture, the Micmac Indians of Nova Scotia and the Iroquois Indians, they lived, and well, in some cases kind of still do, but through descendants, but they lived along the St. Lawrence Seaway. And they shared a common story about that big bear. And in their version, the quadrangle of the Dipper represents the bear, but it's pursued by 7 hunters. And the 3 closest hunters, here again, the handle of the plough, if you like, Amanda, those are the 3 closest hunters to the bear. Bears, of course, are not, very common in North America, aren't they? They used to be common throughout the world, even in, European landmass as well. And in their culture, as autumn approaches, then the 4 furthest hunters dip below the horizon and kind of abandon the hunt, leaving those 3 closest hunters to chase the bear. And this is where it gets quite interesting, because those 3 hunters are all named after birds, and the closest hunter here, the closest hunter there is called Robin. And then the second is chickadee, and the third out there is moosebird. Now, chickadee is supposedly carrying the pot in which the bear will be cooked. And that second star in the handle, which is those 2 stars, Mizar and Alcor, that represents chickadee and the pot. So the other one, Alcor, is quite hard to make out, but I think Alcor is the pot and Mizar is chickadee. And then in autumn, as the bear tries to stand on its 2 legs, the robin, the star Robin, wounds the bear with an arrow, and the wound creates a spray of blood that sprays onto Robin, who shakes his feathers, and in the process colours the leaves of the forest red. And that's autumn, isn't it? That's what happens each year. The leaves on the trees turn red. And of course, he's Robin Redbreast, because some of the red stains Robin. And that's the legend of Robin Redbreast. That's where that originally comes from too. The bear gets eaten, and the skeleton remains of is the constellation you see travelling through the sky on its back during the winter. And then during the spring, a new bear leaves the den, and the eternal hunt continues. It resumes once more. So, there you go. Take your pick from the worldwide myths and legends surrounding the bears. Get your Ovid, get your Homer, have a Google, because that's where so much of it comes from as well. There's a a whole wealth of information out there. There's different groups you can join, like on Facebook and stuff like that, and YouTube's got some great sort of deep space type videos and all that sort of thing. So other than the biggest of Big Dippers, what else can we look forward to seeing in May and June? Let's skip forward just a little bit, because my favourite planet, probably something to do with the name, my favourite planet becomes visible from kind of next week onwards. June is a fantastic time to get up early and go and have a look. Mercury moves on the 22nd of May. I just had to have a quick look there. On the 22nd of May, Mercury's at its inferior conjunction with the sun. I think I said Earth earlier, I meant the sun. And that basically means it's on our side of the sun, so it becomes more visible and Mercury moves in to the morning sky. This is a brilliant map to use as a reference. All those planets, along with Mr. Mercury, they're all visible, even to the naked eye, early in the mornings from late May. So, you know, towards the end of next week onwards. So if you can't sleep because you're worried you've only got 5 followers on TikTok, or get yourself up at about 3 a.m. Take a look eastwards. You can see east to southeast there, and catch a glimpse of Mercury. And you know when you're looking at a planet, because stars shine and planets twinkle. That's the big difference between the two. So when you're looking up, if you're looking at something that's shining really, really brightly and isn't moving, then yeah, that is definitely a star. If you're looking at something that twinkles, well, that's a planet. If you're looking at something really, really bright and is moving really, really fast, that's probably the International Space Station, which of course you can see as well. So get yourself up early for that one. Sunrise on June the 1st is about 10 to 5 in the morning. But our youngest daughter's only 6 months old, so these are normal waking hours for me, definitely. Mercury takes 88 days to go around the sun. It's not the hottest planet. It's the closest planet to the sun, but it's not the hottest planet, and that's to do with its size, its molten core. Venus is the title holder of the hottest planet. I'm sure we're not far behind it. What's this? Well, these are noctilucent clouds. They're clouds that shine at night. That's nighttime. That's not sunrise or sunset. That's actually dead at night. And the season for these clouds at northern latitudes that we're in has begun. It's on now, and every year from this time through towards the end of August in the northern hemisphere, and then from November through to February in the southern hemisphere. So if you're heading to Australia in November, look out for them then. Generally, people at higher altitudes. I don't mean up the Lickey Hills. I mean kind of, you know, up towards Scotland. But I think, like I said earlier, one of my friends over towards East Anglia, they had an amazing view of the Northern Lights quite late last year. And if you're in a place where you can see the Northern Lights, you can see these clouds. They are stunning. Another name for them is night shining clouds. That's exactly what they are, clouds that shine at night, and they are beautiful. In more recent years, so the last sort of 20, 30 years, our northern hemisphere summertime noctilucent clouds have set records for low altitude sightings, not just high altitude sightings. And again, I'm not talking about being high up in the air. I'm talking about you know, where you are on the planet. And there's no reason to think this year will be any different. It seems to be a common theme that they're getting more and more visible, and it's all to do with the extra water that sits in the mesosphere. And we're going to have a little look at what that means in a moment or two. The mesosphere is about 30 to 50 miles above the Earth's surface. Earth sits in the troposphere. In fact, if I go to the next slide, I think I've got a little sort of onion ring thing. Yeah, there we go. So, you know, here's the troposphere, where pretty much everything happens. Jets operate at the top of the troposphere towards the stratosphere. There's your ozone layer there between the two, keeping us safe. I think it's got better, hasn't it, to some degree? And then we go up to the mesosphere, the thermosphere, and the exosphere, and these clouds sit in that mesosphere level. So they're extremely high up. They're not like the clouds we can see today looking out the window. There's a great Facebook group as well called Noctilucent Clouds Around the World. So if you're on Facebook, FaceTube, whatever it's called, have a little look at that, and if you're interested. So from mid-June to July is a good time to see them. You need to go out, you need to look west. So opposite from sunrise, sunset, about 30 minutes after sunset. And if you see those luminous sort of white blue tendrils, then you have spotted a noctilucent cloud. So you don't have to get up the Lickies when it's dark, which is just as well, because it's probably full of doggers. So you'll have a great chance of seeing them, the clouds, not the doggers, or both probably, to be fair. So even the Northern Lights, the aurora borealis, have been seen, like I said, as in low altitude, like the east of England. And boreal is Latin for northern, and aurora is Latin for the dawn. Aurora, of course, was a goddess, and Aurora renews herself every morning and flies across the sky, announcing the arrival of the sun, who's her brother, Sol, and her sister, Luna, is the moon. So all intertwined, all connected. But having said that, I don't think any of them have been seduced by Zeus. So look, that's what I wanted to share with you today. I hope that you found at least one part of that vaguely interesting. I love the mythology around I just love mythology, not just around the constellations, but, Helen of Troy, Pyrrhus of Epirus, and all of that business. Marathon got its name, didn't it, from Phidippides, who ran from Marathon to Athens, a distance of just over 26 miles, carrying news of a Spartan war, probably. I think that's all around the same time. So over to you. Any questions from anyone? You can shout them out, you can raise your hand or whatever. But does anyone have any questions there?
Matt, marvellous. What can I say? I've been sitting here having a glass of, well, not wine, but a glass of water, and I was listening to every word, because I've got a particular interest in this as well, and I was so glad you're able to come back again and join us for Learning at Work Week. We have a number of questions coming in the chat. Let's quickly go on, and can you say we've got the lovely Julie, got David?
Oh yeah, I've got them.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want?
Right, I shall go through those in the order they have been posted. Yeah, running late. Yeah, we know it's the bear. Yeah, plenty of people on here as well. Excellent. Very lucky to live in a village with lower light pollution, Julie. Yeah, you are lucky.
Yeah, Julie lives in Derbyshire.
Well, not far from me, Julie. I'll elucidate on that in a minute or two.
The never side of the Trent.
Yes, that's right. On the but pretty much on the banks. There's a pub. Well, it's a sort of gastro pub. It's about 5 doors down at the end of our little sort of road. The road doesn't go any further. Called the Riverside, and it's on the banks of the Trent. So light pollution. I think somebody else asked, don't they? Is it David there? Read your telescope. Are you in an urban area? Does the light pollution? Yeah. Light pollution does affect it, but I'll tell you what, when the first time I saw those rings around Saturn and Jupiter's red spot, I was in the back garden where I used to live, Moseley, Bilsley, and there was a huge tennis centre about a mile, less than a mile away, with some awful light pollution. But because of the refractive nature of the telescope lens, I was able to see them there. And that was a present from my dad for my 50th birthday, so it can't have cost much. He'd have got it off the back of the lorry. But it's so worth investing in a telescope if you anyway interested and if you want to see these things. But again, you don't have to, because there are so many astronomy clubs. If you Google them, there is, you'd have to go to Birmingham City's training ground, which is fine for me. Over at Wast Hills, they've got an observatory there. And I'm lucky where I live here, just outside Burton-upon-Trent, in a little village called Branston that got its name from, well, Branston pickle was invented here. Don't know how they did that. And just up the road, there's a place called Rolleston Forestry Centre, and they have an observatory, a domed observatory, which rotates, that you can simply join. I think it's like 12 quid a year. And they have, and all of these observatories will have open days as well when you can get there. So David, I would say, don't let it put you off. Try and get to a club that's not far away. Use their telescopes, get their knowledge, and find out what sort of telescope you want. There are many different sorts on the market. If you see one in the range, or if you see one in Argos, it's not worth getting. So you do have to kind of go a little bit special for us. Yeah, okay, Julia, a monthly one might be nice, mightn't it? Just a little sort of 25-30 minute bite-sized one. And Marcia, I hope you're yes, you can come round, use my big telescope anytime. Yeah, more of the sessions, brilliant, excellent. Yeah, and Heather, you like stargazing. There's nothing better sometimes in the summer to go out with a yoga mat or something like that. But don't fall asleep, because Zeus will be after you. But just to go out and lie down when you know that there's a greater concentration of I use the term shooting stars. They're not stars, are they? But look it up. There's plenty of calendars online you can go to find out when you're going to see more of these, and which constellations they're going to kind of come out from and toward. And I love it. I love just lying there watching those shooting stars, as we all call them. Yeah, I think Marcia, they certainly the observatory at Rolleston, if they get their kind of static cameras out, they are all wiped down, and there is hand gel there. But again, that's going to be personal, isn't it? You have to do what you feel you need to do to keep safe, and no one's ever going to criticize that. Thanks, Paul, for your kind words, and Carlos as well. How nice to hear from you, Carlos de la Cruz. Hey,
Carlos is back.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Excellent.
It's always a regular.
Well, look, I've had a little look through those questions. I hope I've managed to answer some of them for you as well. As I say, the session's been recorded, and I'm going to send it out to everyone that attended, and I'll also send it out to the people that asked for it as well. So, Darren, thank you for giving the opportunity, not just for this, but for all the other fantastic work you're doing as well across the Learning at Work week, which to you is like a Learning at Work month.
Well, it is, and quite enjoyable. But people like you, people like Jonathan, also in your kind of, I know you do a lot of work with Jonathan Hathill.
Yeah.
And because he came on Monday as well. It's people like you that make Learning at Work week, really, because you're the volunteers. Because I put out this comms by our lovely comms people. They send this on. You came to me a year or two ago anyway, so you're one of my regulars now. That's the problem. Well,
yeah, that's it. I'm done for now.
Look at all these people wanting more of this. Fits into Learning at Work week. It might fit into Mental Health Awareness week as well, because sometimes you need to take a break, don't you, from work?
Yeah, it certainly helps my own well-being, mental health. Really
so thank you, because you make my job a lot easier, because I've got to fill out a program beginning Monday to Friday every year, and I have to fill it, with insightful topics, and this is a very good topic. It takes also, it's a topic because it's you volunteered to come on here today to talk about your hobby, and that's what learning is. You can learn from hobbies, can't you, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's all learning.
Process. This. So thank you, and thank you very much for coming back again. And I've been delighted, and you are so nice to work with, honestly.
Oh, thanks, Darren. And the same goes for you as well. Very easy.
Do. You are very good, and giving up 1 hour And I know you've been very busy over the last couple of months, particularly the beginning of the year, you know, with all types of bits. And were you involved with the election? Were you trying to get all them?
Yeah, with the newly elected councillors as well. Yeah, we've been doing some workshops for them too. So hopefully they know how to use Teams now and things like that.
To do inductions, but I couldn't do it because I was doing polling duties. But you know, the inductions to the council, but I couldn't do it. So I knew you'd be very busy. So thank you for this. And you got some lovely comments coming in.
Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, it makes it worthwhile. Thank you everyone. I've also put in a map. It's a PDF document. It's a cracking map of the night sky, and if you Google skymaps.com, you'll find a map for the Northern Hemisphere every single month with a calendar list of things to look out for as well. So enjoy that too. And you know, until then, clear skies.
Then, Matt. Thank you again. Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks Matthew.
Bye.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye Matt. Thank you.